Hey, everybody, welcome. My name is Ashley, and I'm the social media manager at Extensis. And I am here with Drew Tucker. He is a creative at Kertis Creative, and we're going to chat about creativity and a lot of things that resonate with different designers and the different things that we got that all of us are going through. So, first, just tell us about yourself, Drew, and then share a little bit about the agency.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this, Ashley. I am super excited to get to talk to you and your viewers. I'm Drew Tucker. I'm the director of strategy at Kertis. We're kind of a mid-sized creative agency in Louisville, Kentucky. Very, very steeped in narrative storytelling, but we do graphic design, we do strategy, we do comms work, pretty much everything, any kind of creative work across the board.
Okay. And so if we were on a rooftop and we were just chatting about Curtis, like how would you describe your agency?
It's such a great question. I always say that I catch myself saying we're a small design firm, but we're not really small anymore because when I started at Curtis, it was like, gosh, 4 people, and now we're getting close to 30 now, and that's been a really great growth rate over 13 years. And so, when I talk about Curtis, I really just like to describe us as a creative agency, and I try to work in that we're very much focused on narrative based storytelling as a strategy. That's really where I start.
Nice. And so guys, I met Drew. I'm a part of an organization called Girls in Tech. I'm in the Nashville chapter, but I wanted to get away. So I went to DC for a design thinking boot camp. And I was just blown away by everything that Drew discussed over a couple of days. Tell us about Girls in Tech. And I know you've kind of been doing like a mini tour.
Yeah, so as you well know, Ashley, Girls in Tech is an incredible organization that really, really looks to support women, young women, and sometimes even older women who are either in their first instance moving into the tech industries or are transitioning from some other job into tech. And as we know, there's been a lot of barriers traditionally to women in those fields.
Mhm.
Um, Girls in Tech tries to sort of fix that, or at least lower the inequality there through trainings and access to information or knowledge based products that young women would need, or really just to give them like new skill sets to kind of help them in the door. So I was really lucky to get asked by Girls in Tech to create a series of boot camps, so 2-day workshops that were really intensive, that would teach
They
design
were
thinking.
they were great.
8 hours a day, 2 days. Yeah, it was intense. Um, but yeah, I was. They asked me to build a boot camp, and they asked me to make it about design thinking, which is a thing that I learned and like worked on a lot in grad school, and something that
Mhm.
I teach and do here at Curtis. It's part of our kind of our fundamental ideology of how we do work. And so we did that, and we traveled all over the country doing these boot camps, and was lucky to meet you in DC.
I want to say this again. Yeah, so I'm on the marketing side, but I wanted to attend because I think creativity is something that we get in front of our laptops and we just go and we don't pause to learn how to create. There are things that just as time goes by we forget about how important it is to exercise our minds so that we can just be our best creative selves. So I brought back so much to my team, and I'm just glad that you're doing this because it's needed. It's like we forget how to learn.
Yeah, we also pretend like creativity is something you just wake up with in the morning, and it's not. It's got to be
Right.
cultivated. It's very much like patience or interest or curiosity. It's a thing you really have to nurture. And in today's society, we don't have a lot of time for that. So I think design thinking is
Exactly.
a really great way to sort of work on that.
Okay. Now, are there any other upcoming boot camps if people are interested, or do you have something outside of Girls in Tech that you're teaching?
Yeah, we have finished the 2022 year of boot camps. We wrapped up in October. We're in discussions for a 2023. Originally, there were going to be 22 boot camps, 11 in the US and 11 outside. And just because of COVID restrictions on travel, we were really unable to hit all those places. So I'm hoping you'll see a worldwide tour next year is the hope. And we're going to figure that out in the next month or so.
Okay.
Also, we at Curtis we schedule these things all the time. We have a series of them that we're going to work on getting set up for Louisville, the city of Louisville. We want to do some city level boot camps. We're trying to do some nonprofit and then some for profit. They're a little different for each sector, of course. So yeah, we're working to get those set up all across the board.
So let's dive in a little bit. Let's talk about how does good design help to make the world less polarized?
It's a great question. For me, design is very simply boiled down to being intentional across a lot of different registers, whether it's through graphic design, whether it's through strategy, whatever you're doing. When you're designing, you're making a lot of intentional choices about how to sort of create a thing or put something in order, right? So I think in our current sort of political world climate, we sort of see we sort of become polarized because we see ourselves as on a team. It's like this baseball team mentality, like you're for this team or this team, and that's definitionally a lack of intentionality, right? That's just like I'm with these folks for whatever reason. I truly believe that if we're being intentional, what we're creating is sort of a level of empathy or empathetic connection with people because we need to understand why people think what they think, do what they do, how we make choices. And so for me, good design is based in empathy, and that's really how we sort of like break down this polarization. And that's the kind of work we do at Kertis through storytelling.
Got it. And something that you taught us is I left the design thinking boot camp just really learning about the value of research and how do we even get to that point.
Yeah.
I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. Do you have anything that you want to add specifically about research and how important that is for designers?
Yeah, it's funny. Like the more I talk to young designers, the more I'm understanding the ability to have time and capacity to do good research is a bit of a luxury nowadays, and that's a shame. Designers can't. We come to we're problem solvers, and we try to have a breadth and width of of uh of knowledge about our the content of things we're working on, but we can't know everything. So we've got to have that time to really immerse ourselves in the subject. So when I'm training folks around design research, the things I really try to get across are just understand that there's always going to be constraints, whether it's time, capacity, resources. Those are just reality of design, and it makes our design better being constrained. So be ready for that. Within those constraints, go broad first, like read everything, see everything you can, then go deep wherever you see things that are really rich. And for me, the tool I use for design thinking and figuring out what's really rich to spend time on, I look for patterns. So does a thing show up in the research a lot of times? So obviously there's some pattern there. Is there an
Mhm.
intersection? And for me, an intersection is really simply just two things you wouldn't think have any relation to each other that keep showing up as touching in the research. And then finally, I look for omissions. And I think this is the one that's the most rich because like nobody thinks about this. Like what's not there that should be? What questions are not being asked? What are people not looking at they could be looking at? We do a lot of research for lots of corporations, and they expect us to, of course, like Google stuff and to read academic stuff and to look at reports, but they never ever think about us showing up on site and tangibly touching their product or
Mhm.
being in the room with their team as they talk through the strategy. And so we try to really employ some like ethnographic methods and like very strange like on-site sort of research methods that really like enliven and make our research richer. So that's the kind of stuff we try to do.
All right, so let's dive into our next question. Let's talk about learning. Learning is a habit. And so, how do you ensure that your teams are constantly doing that?
It's such a struggle. There's only so much time in the day, and our teams are busy. I'm sure all the folks who are watching this know what that's like.
Yeah.
So, we try to do two things. One, we spend a lot of time really reinforcing in our team the idea of embodied learning, and what we mean here is very basically like learning through doing. But that can sometimes be sort of a way to not to sort of say you're doing learning but not really doing it. So we try to make it really intentional. When you start at Kertis, we've learned that there's about a 3 month window where people are like, "What is going on here?" Because it's really fast moving. So we use that space to throw people into every single kind of project. When I first started at Kertis, I went on shoots, I sat through edits, I watched and critiqued video content. I went to photography shoots. I went to client meetings. Just anything any human could do at Kertis. And the reason we do that is it sort of starts making you understand the concepts and the framework of how we work as a company. That gets internalized, and then when you have to, when you start doing work in your silo or like doing work in your own little department, you kind of have a little bit of a global grasp of what we're trying to get accomplished at our company. So really just having people who are on accounts team being on shoots and things like that really helps embody like what a camera is, how it works, like we touch things like, and that's kind of our go-to method. That's the kind of thing we do every day, and we really spend we make that really accessible for people, so we don't just say it, we really take it seriously. The other thing we do is we actually carve out time and resources, and by resources I mean money, for our
Mhm.
teams to go and do training. That can be skills based training, that could be educational training, whatever folks really think they need to grow their role and to fill out the missing pieces of their department. For instance, I am applying right now for an ethics fellowship for design that's in Germany. That's actually
Okay.
hosted through like the Auschwitz Museum and site. So you get to actually go to Germany and sit with folks who have studied how the Holocaust happened, and they use that ethical information to help designers think through the sort of consequences of what they make.
Mhm.
So it sounds really like intense, but I'm really, really excited for it. I'm hoping I get that, and that'll be
Yeah.
2 weeks out of my schedule here, and that's totally supported. So those are the two major ways we do that kind of work.
Okay. And so now we're in a remote space. Do you feel like it's now harder to learn because we're all virtual?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, truly, as soon as COVID hit, we had to shut down about 80% of what we do because it's on site shooting and filming and photography and stuff. Our strategy work went up 80%, which was lucky. And so I was very busy for the next 2 years. But no, I mean, what happened there was I brought a lot of people into my world around strategy, and we did a lot of work around thinking through communication strategy and planning. We did a lot of like sort of research training, like we had talked about previously. And then at the end of the day, we still had to be on site. So there was a lot of embodied learning about shooting and mask and like COVID restrictions and really thinking through the protocols. I would say our team is pretty knowledgeable about COVID safety protocols just from, again, like that sort of on site embodied learning and like reading as much as they can on it. So COVID definitely interrupted us, but it didn't stop
Yeah.
us learning.
Yeah. I try to embed that into my schedule, even if it's just once a quarter, going to maybe like a girls in tech conference or just something to keep the wheels turning. So I love that you guys do that.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we really encourage our team to do is also take the time after a project to talk about what did you learn, right? So, I mean,
Mhm.
just posing the question can be really valuable because every project's different. Like I don't know if I've been on a project where we had a check in where we didn't have a really robust conversation about some difficulty or some challenge that we had to overcome and how we did it. So that's a really incredible part of learning as well. And all of our team is in that conversation. Everyone who touched the project. So I'm learning how the shooters had issues or what they learned or how they changed how they thought about doing the work every time they talk about it as well.
Got it. You guys sound like you have an amazing team because you guys have figured it out how to collaborate and how to learn together.
Yeah, I mean it's a struggle. Like I'm certainly making it sound much more like wonderful, than it is in real life all the time. But generally we are a really close team. Like if anything, we have a kind of bad boundaries. We tend to be friends and hang out outside of work a little bit, and so that can get complicated. But yeah, I mean generally like we have a really smart, good team. When we hire people primarily based on personality and fit, and then
Mm,
we kind of train up for skills. Like we've learned that we can kind of if we have the right person and the right personality, we can usually train the skills into most people. So that's kind of our hiring
yeah.
strategy that's really served us for the last 13 years.
So I know one of your clients was Woodford Reserve, and you focused on their why. So when you are working on projects like this, do you ever get any pushback or resistance?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I'm not sure how it was in the beginning at Curtis. I came in about 8 years into our work, and Woodford was already a major client. We were the agency of record for a bit with Woodford, and it was a great relationship. We still do a ton of work with them, and we have great relationship with that company. And that product is just incredible as well. Just to tell your audience, get some Woodford; it's great. Um, but but yeah, no, it's true. Like I think focusing on the why of a product or a process for a client has always been in our DNA, and it's just part of the DNA of storytelling. It's difficult to talk about a product or a process in an authentic way without getting to the like why do people spend their time and energy on producing it in such a meticulous way. So for us, I think that's just something that always kind of shows up in our work. I've never had a client push back on that.
Mhm.
However, during the boot camp sessions in Girls in Tech, we had almost every single boot camp. At some point, someone would say, "Sure, sure, sure, this is all great, but at the end of the day, it's all about the bottom line. It's all about dollars, right?"
Mhm.
And I know that that's true. Like fundamentally, I know that's true. I'm a director of a department. I know that what it means to have a certain amount of money for a budget, to hire
Right.
people, and to get new equipment. I know that like I can't just do Curtis work for free and because I love it so much. Like I got to pay bills too. But I don't know any CEOs, and I've never ever in my entire career talked to a CEO who just talked that way, who was like, it's only about the bottom line. Even the most like curmudgeon CEO or owner or whatever I've ever talked to, at every moment has always been a person who wants to tell a story about why they believe in the product or why they believe in the organization. So sure, the bottom line matters, dollars matter, but there's also the part of the representational part of what we do and how we talk about ourselves and our corporations, right? So for me, sure, I think there's pushback on why, but I think that there's also a really strong desire to tell that story for most of our clients.
So let's chat about storytelling. What makes someone, Drew, a good storyteller?
Yeah, this is a great question. It's funny. I am maybe the worst storyteller at Kertis because I'm an academic, so my stories are by necessity very boring and very thorough.
Oh, I doubt that. I
Um,
doubt.
I appreciate it. But what I've learned from being on a team of incredible storytellers is that it's not that it's simple, but there's some really simple parts. And my team, the strategy department, we really try to focus on those fundamental parts. So there's three that we really look at. If you're going to tell a good story, you have to know what your communication goal is. What do you want to happen in the world when that story is told and people hear it? You would be surprised at the number of organizations I work with really, really smart people who, when I ask the question of like, we're going to make this product, this story product for you, a video, whatever it is, what's the goal? They'll say the goal of the organization. So they'll be like, to end poverty. And I'm like, well, this story won't end poverty. Like, that's not going to
Right.
happen. Like, what do you want to happen today or tomorrow or in the next week? And so having a clear goal is something that we just sometimes don't take the time to think through. So that's one. What do you want to happen in the world? What's your goal? Your communications goal, your storytelling goal. The second one is knowing who you're talking to. Like, who's
Mhm.
your audience? And, all clients say the same thing. Everybody. We want everybody
Oh
to buy our
gosh,
product. We want
no.
everybody to get the benefit, of course. But
Yeah.
if we had to segment everybody into groups that were more likely and less likely to hear you so that we know what intensity to put that message out at, what would they be? This is a really long, hard exercise. I could spend days with clients just talking about messaging.
Mhm.
And they get really into the demographics of that sort of thing. So that's two. Who do you want to get when you tell your story, when your message is out? Who do you want to get up off that couch and go do the thing? That's important. Finally, the third thing we always harp and focus on is your messaging frame, and this is a big deal given our current climate world we find ourselves in. Messaging frame is all about what emotional framework moves those people to get off the couch and go do the thing you want them to do, right?
Mhm.
We work with a lot of nonprofits and we work around a lot of different issues, and the majority of those nonprofits talk in a language that's very dire, or very severe, or very like kind of doom sounding, like we have to do
Mhm.
this again. And we find that doesn't move people to action. That makes people feel really apathetic, or really afraid, or really like just like, well, we can't win. And so we spend a lot of time thinking through like what other frames or messaging could we tell the story that you want to tell through so that people feel really empowered to get up off the couch. I heard a client
Yes.
just like this last week, who runs our library systems, like the executive of our library systems, told a story. And at the end of the story, I felt really just disempowered and sad about how hard a sort of budget shortfall that Louisville was facing around public services and the libraries. And it's just a little tweak to turn that story around and say that, yeah, there's a budget shortfall, but if you divide that by the people in the city, it's $8 a person. Like, there's a lot of different ways to sort of spin those stories,
I
in a
love
way,
that.
yeah, that makes things happen. And it's people feel like it's being dishonest, but it's not. It's just telling in a different frame so that people leave that moment feeling like they can do something, they can take action. So communication goal, audience segmentation, message frame are the basic three elements for storytelling for us that we really harp on.
That's amazing way to paint that out. So, thank you, Drew. All right, so I do want to ask you something, Drew, about attention spans. In the world of technology and so many distractions, do you feel like people's attention spans are getting shorter? And how does that affect us as creators?
Yeah, this is a great question as well. So I know that the popular thing to say as a media producer is, yes, everyone's attention span is shorter. Everything has to be 30 seconds long. But I have to say, Drew the strategist fundamentally doesn't believe that. I
Mm,
watch movies that are 3 hours long multiple times. I watch series on Netflix over and over and over and over after I've already seen them.
this is true.
I just spend time with things, and not always, and sometimes I can't. I think it's the wrong focus of the problem. I don't think that people's attention span is necessarily getting shorter. But again, I'm not a biologist, right? Or, a media studies person. However, what I think is actually going on is there's so much content out in the world.
Hmm.
We're so busy, and that content is delivered so broadly and so quickly at scale, at like such a large scale, that we just don't have time to take in too much. Or
Yeah,
even when we take it in, we don't have time to make sense of it. Literally at Kertis, I schedule time in my schedule called thinking, because part of my job is thinking. I have to put time in, or I'm just doing all the time, and I'm not stopping to reflect or being like, what does this information mean that I'm taking in? So, no,
love
for
that.
me, for me, I think it's just an overload of too much content and too rapid a pace. And part of it's shutting a lot of that stuff out and just looking at what really matters. So that's kind of my take on it.
I love that. I love that. And I love the just putting on your calendar thinking. That sounds so simple, but we have to do that or we won't make time for it.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you
mean,
for
for
sharing
sure, my team members are often like, "What's Drew doing? He can't come to this meeting because he's thinking." But I I promise it's to make the work better. It's not just
that.
me
Yeah,
hanging out or taking a nap.
absolutely. And I want to ask you one more question. Um, Working remotely is just something that I think we're just going to have to get used to. What advice would you give creatives and teams who are really challenged with just trying to make this work?
Yeah. Here's another really unpopular opinion. Everybody's real excited that meetings don't need to be an hour anymore. They can be 20 minutes, right? Like this is a big takeaway. I think we need to learn to take the time. And this is one of our fundamental storytelling. We have at Curtis, we have this little secret document called our theory of storytelling. It's not some just secret, but um, and one of those things is about taking the time. And what that means is spending whatever time a thing needs to make it good and to make it what it could be, right? And I think that we should treat our meetings and our interactions with people, whether they're on Zoom or whether they're in person, the same way. Now, if you're efficient and you can get that done in 20 minutes, great, more power to you. That's wonderful. Like everybody will love a person who can do that, right? But I think sometimes our teammates are, dealing with pressures from outside of work. They're dealing with pressures from inside of work. The world is kind of tough right now. It's an understatement. So I think it's okay to take time and really, give these interactions the time they deserve. So when I'm on Zoom, I do the same thing. Like we check in, we have a little bit of a like, how you doing? What's it like over there? What's the temperature? And then we get down to business, and then we do a little checkout. And if it takes an hour, it takes an hour. It's not the end of the world.
I want to thank you for your time because I know you're busy. I know your agency has a lot of clients that you're helping out. So I appreciate just the pause to have this conversation with me. And thank you guys for listening. And I cannot wait to interview other creatives and agencies so that we can learn and grow together. You guys enjoy your day.